Welcome to our in-depth analysis of one of the most talked about geopolitical moves of the year. President Donald J. Trump has officially imposed a 50% tariff on Indian goods, citing India's continued import of Russian oil despite international sanctions and pressure. What does this mean for India, for the United States, for global diplomacy, and the fragile balance of international trade? We're breaking it all down in this fully original, commentary-driven video on August 6, 2025. President Donald J. Trump made headlines by signing an executive order that imposed an additional 25% tariff on all Indian imports to the United States. This new tariff was added to an existing 25% tariff, effectively bringing the total tariff rate to a staggering 50% on a wide array of Indian goods. This decision reverberated through global markets, diplomatic circles, and the economic communities of both nations. According to the official statement from the White House, the move was taken in response to India's continued procurement of crude oil from the Russian Federation, which Washington perceives as indirect support for Russia's ongoing military operations in Ukraine and other regions. The Trump administration labeled India's energy relationship with Russia as economically irresponsible and strategically dangerous to global peace and American interests. In his address, President Trump stated, "We must protect our national interests. Any nation that continues to do business with aggressors like Russia will face serious consequences. The United States will no longer tolerate economic complicity." The executive order outlines a 21-day window before the tariffs take full effect, giving businesses and trade officials a brief period to prepare for the changes. However, this move has already begun to impact global trade dynamics and caused concern among U.S.-based importers and Indian exporters. The scope of the new tariff is broad. It affects multiple sectors, including textiles. Indian textiles have been a staple in U.S. retail for decades, particularly cotton garments and home furnishings. Pharmaceuticals. India is a major supplier of generic drugs and active pharmaceutical ingredients apis to the U.S. healthcare system, jewelry, and precious stones, especially diamonds and gold jewelry, which are popular luxury imports, engineering goods, including machine parts, automotive components, and industrial equipment. Its services and software support, though not traditionally taxed as physical goods, these services could be affected by secondary restrictions or trade suspensions. For Indian exporters, the immediate reaction was one of alarm. Industry leaders across major cities like Mumbai, Surat, Chennai, and Bengaluru warned that the tariff could jeopardize billions of dollars in trade and lead to significant job losses. The Federation of Indian Export Organizations (FIO) released a statement saying these punitive tariffs are a step backward in U.S. India economic relations. They penalize Indian exporters who have no direct involvement in foreign policy decisions. Meanwhile, U.S. businesses that depend on Indian imports expressed concern over rising costs. A number of pharmaceutical companies and retail chains, in particular, have started lobbying for exemptions, citing potential disruptions in healthcare delivery and consumer markets. Economists have also weighed in. Some argue that the tariffs may backfire by increasing costs for American consumers and reducing the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturers who rely on Indian raw materials. Others believe that Trump's move is strategic, not purely economic, but aimed at reinforcing U.S. leadership on the global stage by penalizing countries perceived to be undermining Western sanctions against Russia. The timing of this tariff hike is also significant. With the U.S. approaching midterm elections in 2026, some analysts believe that this move is partially driven by domestic political considerations. Being tough on foreign nations can often boost approval ratings among certain voter segments, particularly in swing states with large manufacturing bases. Internationally, the move has drawn mixed reactions. While European allies have largely remained silent, some diplomatic channels within the EU are reportedly uneasy. India has been a key partner in Global South dialogues, supply chain diversification, and regional stability in Asia. Punishing India at this juncture could weaken allied efforts to counterbalance China's influence. In India, the government convened an emergency trade council meeting to assess the impact and formulate a response. According to sources within the Ministry of Commerce, India is considering several options, including appealing through the World Trade Organization (WTO), imposing reciprocal tariffs, and expediting trade deals with other major economies such as the UAE, Japan, and Brazil. Social media in both countries lit up with opinion. While many Americans applauded Trump's hardline stance, others criticized the decision as economically short-sighted. In India, the reaction was more unified: anger, concern, and calls for strategic realignment. A tweet by a leading Indian economist captured the mood. This tariff isn't just a tax on Indian goods, it's a stress test for the future of U.S. India relations. In summary, the decision to impose a 50% tariff on Indian imports is not just a commercial regulation, it is a geopolitical maneuver with far-reaching consequences. It challenges the stability of one of the world's most important bilateral trade relationships and sets the stage for an evolving confrontation over energy security, global leadership, and economic nationalism. Whether this move will lead to new negotiations or further escalation remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the era of smooth U.S.-India trade is now under serious strain. To understand the Trump administration's aggressive stance on India's energy decisions, it's essential to explore the evolving nature of India's relationship with Russia in the oil sector. Historically, India has maintained a strategy of diversified oil sourcing, relying on nations like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, and, to a much lesser extent, Russia. But that changed significantly following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, as the West imposed sweeping sanctions on Russian oil and gas, cutting Moscow off from key financial systems and markets. Russia responded by offering discounted crude oil to friendly nations willing to overlook the sanctions. India saw an economic opportunity and responded quickly. By 2023, Russia had become India's top crude oil supplier, accounting for more than one-third of total imports. The deal was simple: Moscow offered crude at up to 30% below global benchmarks, and India eagerly increased its intake. Indian refineries, many of which are among the most advanced in Asia, processed the crude and often exported refined petroleum products such as diesel and jet fuel back to global markets, including Europe. While technically legal under international law, this practice was viewed in Washington and Brussels as a loophole that undermined the purpose of sanctions. Indian officials rejected that criticism, arguing that they were operating within the bounds of free trade and acting in the best interest of their population. India, with over 1.4 billion people and a fast-growing economy, is heavily reliant on affordable energy. Leaders in New Delhi have consistently maintained that economic survival and stability come before political alignment. To that end, they refuse to join the Western-led price cap coalition and have instead conducted most oil transactions with Russia in currencies like the Indian rupee or the UAE dirham to avoid US dollar-based financial systems. The geopolitical optics of this arrangement were problematic for Washington. India, a key player in the Quad alliance U.S., India, Japan, Australia formed to counterbalance China, was increasingly seen as diverging from U.S. strategic interests. While New Delhi continued to cooperate with the U.S. in defense, cybersecurity, and technology, its economic alignment with Russia raised concerns. It wasn't just about oil. Russia has historically been one of India's largest arms suppliers. The defense relationship between the two countries spans decades and includes joint manufacturing projects, missile systems, and nuclear submarine cooperation. Add to this the growing trade in fertilizer, coal, and technology between the two nations, and you get a picture of a deepening partnership that goes beyond short-term energy needs. In the eyes of the Trump administration, this level of engagement with a sanctioned adversary like Russia called for consequences. Trump's move to impose a 50% tariff is therefore not just a response to the crude oil trade, it's a broader signal. It tells India and other nations watching that continued economic ties with Russia, no matter how indirect, will carry costs. Indian leaders, however, remain defiant. Officials in the Ministry of External Affairs have reiterated that their country does not recognize unilateral sanctions and will continue to purchase energy from any source that benefits India economically. In fact, since the announcement of the U.S. tariff hike, India has reportedly begun discussions with Russian and Iranian officials to explore enhanced energy cooperation, including the expansion of oil pipelines, long-term contracts, and currency swap-based transactions. Trade experts believe India may even accelerate its participation in BRICS energy initiatives to reduce reliance on Western markets and diversify its trade network. While this may serve India's short-term interests, it risks a long-term diplomatic split with key Western allies. Moreover, this situation has exposed a fundamental challenge in modern geopolitics: the growing tension between national interest and global alliance obligations.